Oh, got it.
Okay. So good to see you. I
You
love your
too.
office space.
Thank you.
So how are you?
Oh, I am good. It has been, a wild ride. It's been a while since we've been like caught up. So lots has changed.
Yeah.
Got divorced from Kirk, which was a really good thing for me. It
How long
wasn't
were you guys married?
almost 8 years. We were together for almost 15,
Wow.
16, 14, 14, 2007 to yeah, 14, 2021.
Wow.
Yeah, so we were together a long time, married for almost 8, and it was just tough the last few years. It wasn't a good relationship, and while he's, a good friend to people,
Mhm.
sometimes how people are isn't the same as in their relationship. So,
I definitely know how that is. I'm sure that you saw like
yes,
we can, be with these amazing people and they're still amazing people even if they're not amazing for us.
right,
Because then we're
absolutely.
not amazing people because it takes so much of us to try to fit into what we need to be for them.
Right, absolutely. And I was just like, I was so unhappy, and he was so unhappy, and we held up this great facade. But the last couple of years, like, it just got bad. And, some people that we were friends with got to see like just how bad it was, and that we're close. And, I was tired of it. And he didn't want to go to therapy anymore. And it got to the point where it's not an Amanda problem, it's a us problem. And you have to do some work and work on this relationship if you want it. And he's like, I think we're good. I'm like, okay. And then within a few months, we were like, this isn't good. I'm like, do you want a divorce? And he's like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, all right, let's do it, because I'm miserable and you're miserable. And you're a good person. Just we're not good together anymore. And I'm not going to go back to that person who showed up so many years ago, insecure and being what you want. And you want that person, and I'm just not her anymore. I mean, I know who I am, and I want something different for my life, and I want to have deeper relationships and connections. And if that's not what you want, then I get it. And I want you to have your space, and I want to be happy. And so, I think we actually had a really amicable divorce compared to other people, and that was a really nice experience.
I bet.
I mean, I know with all the people that I know who've gone through divorce or that I've helped, it is not always amicable, and sometimes it's really, and tough. And then, but it was interesting to see how people reacted and responded, and just like the oh well, you didn't try hard enough, being married is
No,
hard. And I'm like, yep,
thank you
got
for
it.
that.
Thank you. You have no idea what I tried or what we did. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you've cared about through your life is to move on and let them go. And I think that, that was also part of me letting go of that girl that I was, and so I could become who I am becoming and am. And yeah, so drastically went through that divorce. I had a lot of rapid change in like 6 months, 5 months. I
Hmm.
moved to my mom's, then moved out of my mom's to Oregon and got a new job. And, so just like so many things happened. And I think I've been kind of like settling in since then. So
So,
yeah,
I met you. How old? I don't know. How old were you when we met? Like,
it was, what? It was in 2007. We
yes, because
met. Yeah, I would have been, um, how old would I have been?
well, I was 20. I was 22.
Yeah, I would have been just turning 30 or just turned 30,
Because
because
I
it was like,
remember like the woman that I met, like you were just like you were still the things that I see now, right?
mhm,
Like you could see all of those things, Just like you were working on like developing programs back then, like your beautiful you,
Oh
and
yeah.
you
Mhm.
were still doing like small
Yeah.
portions of like what you've kind of stepped into. Like it's been awesome to kind of watch you like blossom and transform. But I
Yeah.
think like it was neat to see that once you like like the chain snapped almost. Then it was
Yeah.
like all that rapid transformation took place because you like was like somebody whipped you with a slingshot and you like went right into like you.
Yeah. I love that
Yeah.
analogy because that is like a big thing about yeah, how that happened. And
Yeah.
so that was a couple years later. I think we met when I bought that truck and we just briefly met, very short time. And then we didn't get a, yeah. So then it was, yeah, because Beautiful You Fitness University was shortly after that.
So in 2007, I had just moved to Vegas. So we were in Arizona.
Yeah.
I was there '04 to '06. So I was down there quite a bit. I was still back and forth,
I
but
think
yeah.
it was when you were in Vegas and we came up to get the truck
Mhm.
in December. Oh, I'm pretty sure it was a December, somewhere towards the end of the year because it's pretty cold there
Yeah.
and
And I was
rainy.
just I was thinking like we didn't spend a lot of time together, but
Yeah.
like holy shit.
Yeah. Right. Every time we were together, we connected. So it's kind of like, and it's
Yeah.
been amazing. I mean, I think the reason I started a lot of my like into the business and into the personal growth work, if I look back, is like we started talking about you did your bikini competition and you're like, come on, let's do it. You can do it. You can come up to Vegas. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I've always wanted to do something like that. And then that sparked. So you actually were a really important piece of that journey to where I am
Yay.
now because that competition, choosing to do that with your encouragement, is kind of hooked me up with my first coach who kind of started the whole process of me creating Beautiful You Finish University and kind of that big because I just wanted to do the competition, but her program was like mind, body, and business. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I just want
Mhm.
this body piece and maybe some mindset. And lo and behold, now, and that was in what that was actually in 2012
Yeah.
because it's been 10 years since then. So,
Yes,
yeah,
for anybody listening, we did compete in the 2012 Jay Cutler Desert Classic.
yeah, April. It was April because it was
Yeah.
right before my birthday.
It was
Yeah,
at the Palms Casino.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and that whole time was really neat because like you were into the Kempo and
yep,
I was doing like the boxing, like, and that
yep.
was stuff that was not very supported in my relationship at the time because
Mm-hmm.
that was very selfish, like very self-serving and like very it really filled me up and made me feel good. But,
Yeah.
that turned into taking away what I could be giving to my partner.
Yes. Yeah. My partner was fine with some of it, but it was more like, yeah, do whatever you want. And then it was, wait, you're not here. You're not doing this. You've changed. So it was really this like, yes, go do what you want. And then like penalizing, like, wait, but you're not spending time over here. And I'm like, how do I do it all?
Yeah.
It's so difficult.
Like, looking back, that's something that I see, like, in my own, like, development, is,
Mhm.
I recognize that, like, me taking time for myself or doing excuse me, doing things for myself produced a negative effect in that aspect. So if I wanted harmony here, like, I didn't have a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there was this need to like compromise sometimes parts of yourself in order to make your partner happy. Because I feel like, well, what's coming up to me is there's a little bit of threatening, right? Like you start to get empowered, you start to become more of yourself, and it sometimes can be a little threatening. And I noticed this. Even it was really fascinating. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but for that show, when we were doing that show, you do the prejudging, right?
Mhm.
And I remember being in the hotel room and with my partner, um, and we weren't married at the time yet. And he was he was looking at me and he goes, "You were literally glowing." And like it was because I was doing something that I so loved, that I felt magnetic in. And it just really, I mean, my journey of that process, I really worked a lot on my mindset. So it was a really surreal and fascinating experience when I look back at it,
Yeah.
because it wasn't like my journey was so different, I think, but it was also interesting to see how everybody was insecure at some point of did I do enough? Did I do this? And I was just really kind of focused in on my journey so I didn't get into that comparison with others. But I noticed looking back, like that piece of him noticing when I would do things that I would glow, and and that even in my previous marriage, because I've been married now and divorced twice,
Hmm.
he would, my first ex-husband would say, when he would see pictures of me like traveling without him or when I was away from him, like I looked different. He's like, "You're glowing. In every picture you're not with me, you are glowing." And I'm like, huh. I didn't make sense of it at the time then, but then looking back, I did. But it's, when things would really start to go well, or I would start having all this positive influx, there would seem to be this like negative thing that would happen in my relationship, and my partner would get upset. And like, like, well, that, turning it into where there would be like this great thing over here, and then there would be like this big negative, like instead of encouraging and being supportive,
Right.
it was that other piece of like, you're taking away from us. And I'm like, wait, what?
So the thing that I've noticed, because like I said, in reflecting, it's like I know that you were really similar to me in like the amazing people that we were with were doing really incredible things that like, they're
Yeah.
working for themselves. So they have,
Mhm.
like these businesses that they're doing. And if they're going to
Yeah.
thrive, like they need our support.
Right.
And you were a really like go getting supportive partner, like in there
Yeah.
and in it. And so it's just, I don't want to say it's not fair because I don't feel a relationship needs to be 50-50. I feel like it needs to be 100-100.
Yeah, I think that I'd agree with you. I think that how I look at relationships now is so much different in the sense of like you're each giving to the relationship your fullest self, but you're also supporting each other and your fullest individual development as well.
Yeah.
And so it's really this, I always kind of I don't know why I view it this way, and I know people who are listening aren't going to be able to see, but it's almost like this thread of DNA where you're like together and then you weave apart and then you come
Oh, I
together.
love that.
And so I just always think about like, because you're growing, and without your partner, there's so much why I'm so grateful to those relationships, even though they don't work out, is because I learned so much about myself. And without that partner and without those experiences, I wouldn't grow in the direction I have. You can only, when you're not in a relationship, you only grow in certain ways. So it's the relationships that help you grow in other ways. But it's that supportive of togetherness and separateness that's really, I think, important, instead of like, we complete each other. No, we're complete, and we
Yes,
come together to create something way more fucking fantastic.
I love it. I love that. So it's good to hear that your split was amicable. I recently got married and divorced in a 6-month span. I'm sure that was fun to watch, like not having caught up on Facebook.
Yeah, I was like, we kind of got caught up a little bit, and you're like getting married, and I know I'd seen it, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then all of a sudden you were going through divorce and then getting remarried, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, no judgment. Like
Yeah.
everybody's journey is their journey, and I love watching it. But yeah, I love knowing a little bit more, because
Oh,
that's,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. It was really, really, really challenging time. So, 2020, it was June of 2020. Um, I had talked to one of my old friends from back in Bullhead City from growing up. We were talking during COVID. I wasn't working. He said, when things open up, you should come up here. Mind you, I was almost a year sober, like the first time in
Mhm.
recovery. Really hard to get to that point.
It is.
But in COVID, like there was people that were like doing backyard meetings, there was people doing Zoom, and I was feeling real cocky, and I was like, I'm good. I don't need to go to meetings. I don't need to call my sponsor. I don't need to do all the things that got me to this point. So
Mhm.
then, without me recognizing it, instead of filling that hole in myself with the things that the spiritual tools that I gained in recovery, I started reaching outward. So I reached back to this old friend that is no longer a friend. I reach out to him, and so he was in Washington. So I'm like, I don't need to wait for the shutdown to end. Like, you can book a flight and get on a plane right now. There's no one determining what's essential and non-essential. So there's
Right,
like the root of my ism is that selfish, self-centered, right? Like, it's
right.
already just there front and center. So I flew up to Washington. I loved it. I didn't, play the tape or think through how that was going to go. I went home, I packed up all my stuff, and then I moved there.
Yeah.
And I drank the day I got there, not the day I visited, but the day I got there. I was 10 days away from 1 year.
Oh, wow.
And, there was so much shame in that.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
the friendship was over, 20 years, but we
Mm,
had lived in opposite states for those 20
mhm,
years. So this was
right.
like a catch up every 3 to 5 years friendship.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
like, you only remember the good things, like that
of
selective
course.
memory. Yeah. When you're lonely and you're just looking to raise hell, like, I fell back on
Yeah,
all my.
and yeah, when you wanna be wanted and you wanna connect and you wanna
Mhm.
feel wanted and desired,
Oh,
you
yeah.
absolutely avoid looking at certain things and
Oh,
focus your
man.
attention just on this other thing.
So, yeah, I got there, I got drunk, and it was bad. It was like, my mindset was like, I know better now. Like, I won't let it get out of control. I was blacking out and binging right away. I was sneaking drinks in the morning.
Mm,
Um,
yeah,
so we were not compatible whatsoever, like, personality-wise. Like, he's more, I don't know how to describe it. He's not a bad person, but he was very much not good for me.
right,
Like, I'm
absolutely.
just, my, like, positive he, like, called me toxically positive, to where I'm like, "I'm trying to control my vibe here. Like, I'm gonna choose joy, I'm gonna choose happiness." And he wanted to, like, pull that out because he wasn't experiencing that,
Mhm.
and we really butted heads from day one. But, like, with me drinking, like, I was the hurtful one, like, verbally abusive. I could have been
Mhm,
physically abusive. I don't know, I was blacked out.
mhm.
Like, I just
Right,
went to depths that I hadn't been to before.
right,
Um, and, he kept telling me, "You need to quit drinking, you need to quit drinking," and in my head, I'm like, "I don't," you don't wanna let go of it, but also
right,
you want nothing more than to let go of it. But
absolutely.
surrender means accepting the change, and that's such a scary thing, even though when you're on the other side, it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, how I've described it because, even though it wasn't through sobriety, although I have my own history with sobriety as well, I would just remember this blind faith of moving, like, not knowing, like, I'm moving out of state, but I have no idea where I'm gonna live,
Mhm.
and I envision it as, like, being off balance and reaching into this unknown space, like, leaning forward, but also, like, looking back and trying to, like, hold on, but realizing you can't, you're only on one foot, and you're, like, really unstable, so you feel
Yeah.
like you're gonna but you have to let go of this in order to move forward, and it can feel so because there's so much ambiguity and so much uncertainty, and you just yeah, that surrender of, like, trusting that everything is gonna work out and you're going to be okay no matter what happens.
So much has happened, and we're always
Yeah,
okay eventually. We don't feel
absolutely.
that when we're so in fear, like, so fear
Mhm.
driven that, like, that's all you can. I'm, like, blinded by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yes, I was, like, I guess, telling him that I hated him and that I hated that I
Mhm.
married him, and I don't remember these things. And then my mom reached out, and she was freaking out in the morning asking if I was okay, because in a blackout, I had reached out to her and told her, "What happens tonight isn't your fault. I love you so much." And that's where I
Oh,
was going, like, between the
mhm.
shame and the regret of my choices, both between drinking and in putting myself
Mhm.
up by Canada, clear far from, like, all my support system in this situation that I clearly,
Yeah.
didn't wanna be in. I knew that the only place for me to go was, the rooms of AA, because I knew that
Yeah.
all I have to do is walk in and say I'm an alcoholic and I'm in. Like,
Mhm.
secret handshake, done.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so, he really didn't want me to go to meetings. He said, "I just want you to not drink. I don't want you going to those meetings." And I'm like, "Well, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't possess the power to do that on my own." And
Yeah.
so that was a big issue. And
Mhm.
then, he worked nights and I worked like mid-shift-ish, but it was
Mhm.
just we were on totally I just found, like, so much relief when he walked out the door, and when he walked in, I felt such a big weight, and that
Yeah.
just like, that grew, and there was just blowouts all the time, and then going to meetings.
Mhm.
I started going to meetings in November. My date that I've kept is December 10th, 2020. So I
Okay.
moved there in June, and it took 5 months to get me back in the rooms. But by February, he just, he said, "This isn't working." And I refused. I
Mm,
refused to tell him that I was miserable. I was still trying to hold up that. I'm like,
mm,
"Let's go to therapy," because I knew he wouldn't go to therapy. Like, I didn't take the higher road. Like, in
right.
hindsight, I could have walked it differently, and I'm just thankful that it's walked.
Right.
But,
Absolutely.
I kept saying, "We need to go to therapy," and he said, "You're the one with the problem, you go to therapy."
Mm,
And that was, like, my big I wanted him to say those things, if that makes sense.
yeah.
Like, I wanted
No,
him to be
yeah.
the bad guy, even though that's all I wanted was for him to just say he
Yeah.
was done.
I would probably still be in my marriage had my ex-husband, my second ex-husband, not said answered the question. Like, I'm like, "Do you want a divorce?" I mean, that wasn't the first time I asked it. That was probably, the second or third time I'd asked it.
Yep.
But he said, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Thank fucking God." Like, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because I wanted that too, but I also struggled. I was scared because to speak up and use my voice, because for so long, my voice, and I have a huge history with shame as well.
Mhm.
It just I it wasn't it wasn't there. It was scary to, like, speak up and claim what you want.
Yep. It was
Mhm.
very scary, but as soon as he said that, he was like, "We should just get a divorce." And I'm like, "Okay, you asked for this."
Right.
And then but inside I was just like, "Huh." And then when
Yeah.
he would
Yeah.
come up and say, "Maybe we should work on it," I'm like, "Okay, no." And that's when I was able to have the conversations. But
Good.
then I'm in Washington, it's still like the second shutdown was just opening, so, like, it was around that time, I wasn't sure, like, pretty much from when I got there, I wanted to go back to Vegas, wanted to go back to Vegas. Granted, in Vegas, I had created some chaos also. So I
Right.
didn't think I was running, but, you know,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I didn't because I had a sponsor and I was doing something and I had something
Mhm.
positive going and a good job. And then
Yeah.
so we separated in February and he said, "You know what? I wanna get a yard for my dog. I wanna shop. I'm gonna move out." And I was like, "Okay, so that means we have to live in the same space." So he stayed in the bedroom and I stayed on the couch, and
Mm.
that might have been worse than the marriage part.
Yeah.
Living in that same space was the worst.
Mhm.
Um, it was really, really dark, and it was scary because I finally felt like I was doing what was right for me and sticking
Mhm.
to it and, like, setting and holding boundaries. And then
Mhm.
there was a lot of consequence, just like in, my 20s and in my experience in previous relationships to where when I'm doing something for me, that's gonna be punished.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
this time I just was willing to walk through it. Like, I was willing to take whatever came my way to not be in that. Like, I wasn't
Mhm.
going to surrender to that anymore because I had already surrendered to something bigger.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, he moved out and we were trying to, like, get back to the friendship because, I have love for this person. We have been in each other's lives for so long, but it was so toxic, like the
Mhm. Yeah.
threats and like the phone calls and like, being in the park, but like not on my property. And like,
Mm.
it got really bad to where I learned how to set a boundary. It was like
Mhm.
the scariest but best thing
Yeah.
ever to like hold it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
in that time, I was not looking for anyone, but I just happened to meet like the best man for me ever. There was no part of me that was like, okay, next, who's next?
Yeah, that's a different, I mean, I've teetered in and out of that a little bit. Like I've been single. I mean, I did date a couple people, but I did find myself reaching out when I would get lonely. And the first person I dated for a little bit, I was like, not he would tell me, I'm not good for you, you really shouldn't date me, and I'm like, it's cool, I got this. And one of
Not
my
I believe you.
right, my friends was like, yeah, not I believe you, okay, let's end this. I'm like, it's okay, but I so was still in that place of like, I want to be loved and want to be wanted and want to, and I moved to Oregon to create a huge boundary to be able to like be with myself and hear myself and know what I really wanted. And so I just remember a friend messaging, like, I was like, yeah, da da da. She's like, you do not got this. Stop. Stop. You absolutely have to just end this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So I did. and then and then I met somebody else who we dated for actually like 8 months, but then it abruptly ended. But in between the two, I'd started therapy for myself and really had this therapist who helped me kind of really look at, how are you showing up? Are you asking enough questions? Because I'm so used to molding myself into whatever my partner wants me to be, um, holding my own space and holding who I am can be really challenging for me in a relationship.
Mhm.
Speaking my truth, asking questions, getting vulnerable, even while I can do it in all these other areas in relationship with a partner, it's a real challenge sometimes because of my own history of abandonment and rejection. And
Mhm.
so I did a lot of work. So I was showing up in this relationship so differently. And then it abruptly the like ended. And I was like, wait, what is happening right now? And like it's been 6 months now, but it really like took me back because I'm like, I thought we were building something. And then all of a sudden you say, this isn't working for me. I'm not ready to be in a relationship. I need to work on me. And I'm like, what is happening?
You're not
Like,
ready. You already are.
right. We're still friends. Um, and he was such an important person, but it was literally like a gut punch because I was not expecting it. I wasn't expecting it. This person was like, I'm like, told him my biggest fear is you're going to break up with me. When I started noticing he was having a little bit of like stuff. And he's like, nope, that's not on the table. And then within a couple weeks, it was like, I'm getting ready to go there, and I get a phone call late at night. So I'm excited. I'm like so
Yeah.
excited. And I'm like, oh, you're calling me. And like, this is such a treat. And then I'm listening to him talk, and I'm just like, wait, are you breaking up with me? And he's like, yeah, I think it's for the best. And I'm like, what? And I like literally just remember being so stunned and shocked and like this felt I've had to do a lot of processing. I went back to therapy for a little bit around it because I was like, I just wasn't expecting it. And I completely support people. Like, I completely understand if you can't be in a relationship and you need to work on yourself. So I felt also conflicted of this. I want to support this is what you need and respect your boundary. And this is really hooked up and
But
it's not
not to
fair,
me.
but not to me. And I felt like, oh, what is like, and I'm like, I don't get a choice. Can't we work through this? Can't, and I'm like, And as I've gotten farther away, as I've gotten, I'm like, okay, this person was a beautiful experience for me because he gave me this new understanding of what a relationship can look like. So even though it's not happening with him for whatever reason, it's okay. It gave me a new bar to kind of not necessarily compare the next person to, but for what understand what I'm looking for in a relationship. Like there are so many things that, just little bits of things, like my ex-husband would get so upset if I wanted to eat bites of his food. I love food. I'm a big foodie. I want
Mhm.
to try all the food. Tapas is like my favorite, because you get small plates and everybody gets to eat a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And it was a real source of like contention. And like, he'd be like, if you wanted this, you should have ordered it. I'm like, I don't. I just want to bite.
I wanna
Like,
get
just
something different from you so that I can eat both.
right, and I'll share. And this last relationship with the man I was dating, he would make us food and he would give us one plate and we would get to share. And it felt so intimate and so um like I felt so connected and nurtured in that space. And I'm like, I want somebody who is willing to share their food with me. So it really helped me understand what I'm also looking for to
Yeah.
experience in a relationship. So I see those all as gifts. And who knows what happens in the future, right? We never actually know. Um, but I've actually, like you did for that time being, I've actually moved towards I'm not really going to seriously look to date anybody. I'm
Mhm.
hoping that as I do the things that I love, like going to the ballet or going to the theater, that I'm going to meet someone through the experiences of doing the things I love. When that is, I don't know. And it's obviously sometimes a challenge because I would love having a relationship. And I'm also okay and happy with where things are right now for me as well. So,
Which is
yeah,
a
it's
wonderful place to be.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely when you do this work, it is kind of a mind fuck sometimes because you're like having to hold two paradigms or polarities in this, like, okay, I see this and I don't like this, and I see this and I know this truth, and I see this truth. Okay. Have you found that as well?
Absolutely. So, like, I recognize that I'm still living my pattern, but no
Yeah.
regret.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
there are so many like, recognizing that both, like, the good things and the really, really bad traumatic things in my life,
Mhm.
they're not my fault, but they are a direct result of my choices.
Right. Oh, yeah. Ownership. That's like a huge thing. Like, we're not responsible for certain things, but yet we are responsible for one, how we allow it to affect our choices and the future
Yes.
decisions we
So
make.
I do get to choose differently, especially in how I show up. So
Hmm.
while, my therapist pointed out, my sponsor pointed out, my parents pointed out, my best friend didn't because she's my, like, ride or die
Yeah.
biggest cheerleader, Candy. But, but everybody else really pointed out, like, "Brandy, this is your cycle, like, you go
Mm,
from relationship to relationship." And I'm like, "Well, that's not fair. I was in a relationship from 19 years old to 30." Like,
right.
I didn't really give myself a chance to see what my pattern is because I just, I stay no matter what.
Yeah, me
Like,
too.
yeah.
I
Because I
stay, I
didn't
got this. I got this.
Yeah, but I didn't got this. Like, I
Yeah, no.
struggled and never, ever, ever was really willing to admit that I wasn't living authentically. Like, I wasn't willing to
Uh,
look at any of those things, and it wasn't until that ended. I mean, I also broke. Like, I
mhm,
chose I could have chosen the high road, and I could have worked on myself, and I didn't. I chose
mhm,
to drink,
mhm.
and, I mean, I lived on my mom's couch. I sold my house, and I drank my half of the money.
Oh,
I
wow.
split the money that I made from the house with my long-term ex, and,
Mhm.
uh, and I got, like, 37 grand, and I lived on my mom's couch, paid a couple of electric bills, and I drank 37 grand in, like, 4 or 5 months.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, I went from, I don't know, I think you and I spent a New Year's together. I think it was like us and my friend Audra in my
Yeah.
house that had the red walls. And I remember saying like, I'm not gonna drink after midnight for a year or something
Right.
like that. And I think I
Yeah.
drank at like 12:15 or something, like the mere thought.
Yeah.
And that was before it got way, way, way worse. But anyway, yes. So as far as like the paradox, the paradigm, it's like,
Yeah.
helping people choose differently and like show up differently in their life, but then also being like, but I'm
Mhm.
willing to make this choice for myself. And so far it's the best. It's the best,
Yeah.
second best choice to not drinking, because I
Yeah.
would never get to experience the life that I'm living right now if I was.
Yeah.
So like I can't
Absolutely.
ever leave that out of
Hmm.
where I'm at because it's such a huge part because of who I become now when I
Yeah.
drink.
Yeah.
Because even this like happy, healthy, thriving Brandy, when she drinks, she goes to this really terrible place. So
Very dark. Yeah.
so now in being with my husband now, like he pushes me where I haven't, in places I haven't grown yet. Like it's really,
Mhm.
really neat. Um
Yeah. That's awesome.
I met him and I'm like, this guy's not my type. Like he's tall, he's handsome. But first of all, I wasn't looking. And second of all, like I'm like, he's I didn't know if he was like playing softball. He's a baseball coach, but I just saw them in like sports clothes. And he doesn't look dangerous. Like he doesn't look like
Oh, he's not the bad boy that we're
at
so
all.
attracted to, like the unavailable bad boy that you're like, I know you're not available, but I can
Yeah.
fix that.
But pick me.
But
Yeah.
pick me. Yeah. No, I don't
Uh-huh.
know
So
anything about
something clicked in my head to where I was like, maybe that's a good thing. So,
hmm
like we met right after me and my ex-husband had separated.
hmm
And so I went through my steps in 6 months. So I didn't go on a date with Scott until I was done with my 12 steps and I was raising my hand to sponsor other women. So then I'm fully, you know,
committed to your path.
committed to my program first,
Hmm.
right? And then my ex had moved out because that was a lot. So we were still legally married, but not
Not
speak
together.
and not
Yeah.
speaking.
Yeah.
um and then I went on a date with him and we were supposed to go axe throwing.
Oh,
And I'm
that's
like,
a
that
fun
sounds
first
fun.
date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was also like the tail end of 2021 COVID. So
Uh,
you had to like make a reservation and we didn't do that. So he was living in his cabin on the water in on Camino, Washington. Um he was living there and I walk in and I'm like, who the fuck lives like this? And he's like, excuse me? Because I've been his bartender. Like I met him in my work. So I'm like, you just fucking wake up and you just have this big bay window to the Puget Sound and like, what is this? Like, where am I?
you're like, he's like thinking you're judging him, and you're like, oh
This is
my God, like,
amazing.
this is amazing.
Yeah. So we didn't go on a date. We just sat on the back patio and got to know each other.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
like that's like my, not that it matters on a podcast, but that's like my profile picture in my wedding dress because I'm like, this is where I fell in love with you. Like it was just sitting
Yeah.
here because I was in relationships for so many years and I don't think that that was ever a thing
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
just sit and just be and like get to know like the inside of like what do you think about like people
Yeah.
say, oh, I want to talk about the moon and the stars and dude, I was so blown away at just this happening with this person that I totally judged.
Right.
Um, and I didn't stay over. I drove an hour home, which I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, because I was super attracted to him and like way into him. But I was like, no, I'm not. We just like cuddled under a blanket by a fire and looked at the stars, and then I went home. And
Yeah.
he was coaching a summer league in Port Angeles, so I
Okay.
didn't really get to see him that much. So it was kind of like a direct opposite from everything I've ever done.
Right. So that like the complete like enmeshment and like always being together versus this ability to go slow and get to know someone
Yes.
and really kind of have that ability to step back and feel what you feel without just being totally like immersed into their energy and the feeling of the relationship. Yeah.
Yes, and I didn't get to, like, study his world to see how I could, like, latch onto it.
Right.
And I
Right.
could recognize when those feelings were coming up, and I
Mhm.
could notice the feeling, and,
Yeah. Because you
like,
had space.
yes, so becoming the noticer instead of, like, the doer and the beer, like, this is
Mhm.
what I'm reaching for, like, this is what I've been working towards. So, it's been really, really amazing, like, getting to just
Yeah.
show up different and, like, have somebody push me towards my goals, and, like, I get to go like, that was a big thing for me with being a girlfriend, was that I so got to, like, support everything, and,
Mhm.
I got to go to all the thises or the that's, the
Right.
events, and I got to be
Yeah.
that person. Well, now I'm like a baseball mom,
Mhm.
and it's like, I don't know if you remember, but, like, I kind of had the house where the back door was never locked.
Right.
So, like, people would just come in, and there was
Yeah.
no. And sometimes it would be 2 people and sometimes it would be 10 people, and, like,
Right.
that became my thing, was, like, cooking for all these people, and now I get to take that thing that I learned from this tumultuous period of my life, and I get to feed all these baseball kids. Like, I see it play out, and I'm like, "This is so crazy because like.
Right. Yeah, that's how like some of the things that we go through absolutely prepare us for our future and
Mhm,
like things and we get to utilize that in a different way. And I've had a similar experience with the man I was just dating that ended. We lived 2.5 hours apart. And so we only had limited time to be able to be together, so it gave us lots of time to have conversation and get to know each other. And that going slow, you really get to notice sometimes where you're rushing or you're pushing. You get to notice your pattern a little bit easier with that space. And so I did. And even now, reflecting back, I still see where I was in that pattern a little bit. Not as much as like the person before that, or how quickly I jumped into my other relationships in the past and how much I took on, I was still able to do better, but I still see where that was happening. But yeah, absolutely. Like I think everything that happens to us, we grow and we are impacted. I always, with some of my clients, will crumple up a piece of paper like this is you, and then crumple up the piece of paper and then straighten it out. And these are all your experiences from the crumples. And then
mhm.
you smooth it back out, and it's still a straight, flat piece of paper, but it's got all these lines and creases in it because even though you work through things impact you and affect you, and no matter what happens, it's never going to go back to be the same. You just keep moving forward and you get to synthesize and integrate all the lessons and then choose, how do I want this to impact me or dictate the narrative I create for myself. So the
I
fact that
love
you've been
that.
able to do that is, yeah, huge. And it's amazing because there is value in even our most horrific experiences sometimes. um it takes a lot of work to get there, and it's we don't want to gaslight ourselves because that's can really happen. We want to feel our emotions, but absolutely like finding the power within our experiences is so important.
Absolutely. Like, there's that long relationship, really, I let dictate my life so much longer after it was done, and I very much was, like, the victim. I felt the victim, and I romanticized it, and I just longed for this story that I was telling in my head,
Hmm.
and, it wasn't really through therapy, it was through the 12 steps,
Yeah.
where I really recognized what my day-to-day life was
Hmm.
actually like,
Yeah.
and
The reality checks.
And how I was only a victim of my own choices in
Right.
that, you know,
You kept choosing that.
I
Yeah.
kept choosing that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest truths for us. And most of my work and it's like growth has come from either in coaching or friends who are in the spiritual growth coaching or therapy world. Um, because I avoided therapy for a really long time.
Mm,
I'm fine. What do I need to work on?
yeah.
Not true. We all have things to work on. But it was just, it's such a interesting experience, that truth of like, I'm choosing this. And to get to the point where you say, I keep coming back for this. And I had a friend ask me one time, I'm really good at like, so you said romanticizing. I love that.
Mhm.
I believe in people's capacity to change, so much so that I sometimes see their potential, and I'm just like, I see that. I don't see what's actually happening right now. And she's like, Amanda, if nothing changes and this is your reality for the rest of your relationship, your whole entire life, the next 50 years, are you okay with this? If nothing changes, it's great that he has potential and you have hope. But I think this is fucking you up. I think this is messing with your ability to see the truth of what's happening, and then to go, oh, like I'm not responsible for his choices, what how that the things that he does, but I'm responsible for staying. And yes, it's complicated, especially with abuse issues. I want to, just in case anybody's dealing with that while they're listening, um that it can be very complicated of the separation of the relationship, and it can be sometimes very dangerous. So that I always say real carefully, like, get help.
Yeah,
um
that we're just speaking generally in a general
Generally, yeah,
relationship, not
right.
if you're in danger, that's a whole different ball
Well,
game.
different, yes.
And there
Yeah,
are people that can help you with that, but don't
yeah.
attempt to take this advice and apply it to that.
Right. Yes, please. Thank you. But there's so much that we choose that we don't recognize we choose. We choose, and when we focus on hope, or we focus on potential, or we focus on anything outside of the here and now, the past, the future, we have to look at what's happening right now and then decide. And that I think has been a huge shift for me, to not, what I noticed with my ex-husband is he was in the past and looking at the past, and I was looking at the future, but neither one of us were present in the moment for
Because you didn't
ourselves.
like the right now.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
today, Amanda, and today, Kirk didn't.
Right. Didn't mesh.
Yeah.
He was like past Amanda, and I was like future him. And so I see
Oh
it,
my
and I'm
goodness.
just like, wow, that's so fascinating. And how you said, even dictating being out of that relationship, like I still am discovering things that from that relationship that I'm still like rewriting and unwinding from, because they were so invasive, or I took on so much, and it was so I adopted it. I like just like blindly adopted some things, and I'm like
Oh,
having to step back and question, is this really what I believe, or is this what I took from him and just like digest, like it, like took in without like discernment,
there's
so
a lot.
now,
Yes. Oh, I
yeah,
feel that so much. Like that is so huge for me to where I'm like, I don't know if I believe that or it's just my beliefs. Like
right,
it's something that I just chose to take on, but I don't know if it's mine.
right, absolutely. And so that's like a lot of my like sitting going, okay, this is coming up for me. Is this what I believe? Or is this what I've been taught to believe? And so, really understanding what our beliefs are, what are our intrinsic and what are external beliefs, like what have we learned and taken on, or what do we really believe?
Yes.
And it's been interesting, because sometimes I have to go back to pre um like to Mandy. So I have like Mandy and Amanda, And I have to go like way back into my childhood to think about, what was I like then? What was I like before this, before the points that I feel like my life changed, right? Obviously that it's not all like that. It's not like one thing happens. I mean, it can be, but there's usually a lot of things that influence us. But we all come up with, it was this moment that my life changed. And I have this perfect, just talking to a friend about this perfect idealization of my life pre-9, before we moved from Oregon to Arizona. My life was perfect and everything was great.
Mm.
Whether or not that's true or not, it's my ideal vision. And so I go back to like, who was I then? And then even with my therapist, like looking at, was it really me, or was then I being influenced by the world around me still? So it's interesting, like, to do this work and to see, and then be able to really go, what do I believe? Okay, and even if I believe that then, what do I believe now?
Yes.
Because
So
I get
I
confused
like
that.
the idea of the unlearning of like
Yeah.
all the things that our lives and our, everything that we've experienced has,
Mhm.
we've taken on, like, just the unpeeling to that
Yeah.
Mandy, or to
Yeah.
that like little Brandy of like, I want that like curiosity and that
Mhm.
like
Wonderment.
the healthy reckless abandon, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Not the let me just take this wild and crazy risk.
Yeah.
That's
No, but
really risky.
just like
But
that playful and that
mhm.
inquisitive and that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of, I talk about it as you said, unlearning, and I talk about unbecoming,
Mhm.
because a lot of times we become things, and then it's about the unbecoming, the shedding off, the removal of the cloaks
Mhm.
that we, you know, bring upon ourselves, or whatever it is, so we can become what we truly are, which is always in there. It's just protected with all these layers of things, because somewhere along the way we learned it's not safe to show up who you are. So it's about
Yeah.
cultivating the sense of safety to show up as you are, and the belief that you're going to be okay,
Mhm.
even if it doesn't land with everyone.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. I love that. And when you said that, like, immediately my mind went to like one of my earliest memories of being a child, and the first moment that I felt like it wasn't okay, and I had to figure out what someone wanted me to be so that I could get their love. And I was like
Right.
5, dude.
Yeah, this stuff starts so early. Like, we learn, so part of the work that I've done is infant and toddler mental health work. And it's fascinating how much we learn that we don't even remember, of that we need to do this in order to make this, because our survival depends on our caretakers, which is, so yes, there's codependency, but there's also interdependency. And being interdependent, that's a healthy thing.
Mhm.
um, so it's that other enmeshment, but we learn super early the impact that if I do this, this happens, and then we start altering our behavior based upon the responses and reactions and consequences that happen from that. We learn, if we cry too much and we just always get a bottle shoved in our mouth, that, well, we must want to eat every time we feel discomfort. But we don't realize that, because we just don't realize that we don't have that memory, because it was formed in, our implicit memory before language versus our explicit
Yeah.
memory. So it really is, but like, you learn how to respond, and then you just go with it. And then the other thing that's such, I found such an interesting thing through my work, for my own development, is like, sometimes the lessons that our important people try to teach us in life, whether it's our parents or whoever, they teach us one thing, but we internalize something else.
Oh, yes.
And so they may have said one thing to help us understand not to do that because it's not socially acceptable. But then we take it about something being bad about ourselves, or they say something because they're scared and fearful we'll get hurt. And we're like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. Like, and so we internalize it, and if they never come back to help explain why and understand what we took from that, then we live with these messages for years that our parents never meant to teach us,
Yes.
which is really weird sometimes too.
So me and my mom are really close, and we were not when I was growing up. Like at 12 years old, I like went off the deep end. She divorced my stepdad that had raised me from 3 to 12, and like I wasn't having it. So like we're
Hmm.
so close now. Like we talk once a week now. Like since I've moved, my schedule's all over the place, but I tell my mom and her now husband, Greg, they've been married for like 23 or 24 years. I tell them everything. Like, I tell them the
Yeah.
stuff they don't want to know, whatever. Like, I talk to them like my best friend.
Yeah,
Um,
me too. I have
but
this similar
yeah,
relationship with my mom of where we weren't very close when I was younger, and now she's like my best friend.
but we do go back to like those questions. Like, we do go back and say, when this happened and when I did this and when I said this, like,
Hmm.
how did you take it? And like, this is what I meant. And like, when
Hmm.
I made amends to my mom and she kind of went back and said, "Did you really feel like I blah blah blah?" And it's like we really, when it comes up, we do go
Yeah.
back and it's amazing because I don't think we would have the relationship that we have if we weren't able to like acknowledge, she had me in high school. Like
Yeah.
she was 17. She
Hmm.
did her very best, and I'm so
Yeah,
thankful that I know that now because I judged her and, like, I always felt so
absolutely.
rejected as a kid, and now I see that I was the rejecter, like, no one was good enough for me.
Right. Yeah. That's me and my mom do the same thing. We go back sometimes. We'll, I'll ask questions or I'll come up and we'll go through that. But it's really fascinating to be able to have those relationships because I know not everyone does, or maybe not every
Yeah,
parent is safe to have that. So um but yeah, when you can have those discussions and kind of work through that now. And I think the other big thing you said that I had an experience with my dad because I felt really rejected from my dad, was being close to his age when he divorced, and separated from my mom, and being able to. So I was at the age when he, my age now, well, not now, but 10 years ago or whatever it was, he would have been that age when he did this.
mhm,
And it gave me to the ability to look at our parents' life at the age that they were and we are at the time we are the same age, and to look back at what might have they been going through. And I remember some just surreal, like looking at nieces and nephews and going, I wonder if our parents felt like this, or aunts and uncles. Like, I feel really, maybe, like just these moments, but when you're able to see life from their perspective, it really shifts and creates that like ability to connect with them in a different way and give them the benefit of the doubt, understanding that they did the best. Were they perfect? Absolutely not. Did they make mistakes? Oh yeah. But
mhm,
what was their intention? And when you're able to have those deeper conversations, and I had one with my dad after I went to this retreat and I did this inner child work, and then I had this conversation with my dad, and about this pivotal moment that I remember when I was 14 with him, and like I've really clung on to this. And he goes, I don't ever remember saying that to you. And I'm like, wait, I've been holding on to this for 25 years and you don't remember it? What the? And he's like, if I did, I am so sorry
yeah.
because I have never felt that way about you. And I'm like, huh. I've like dictated my relationships around this belief that I'm unlovable and unwanted. And if I speak up, then I'll be harmed and like verbally rejected. And, I have to be quiet and amenable in order to have a good relationship and do what you want and not talk about what I want, and not, and I'm like, that is just like so messed up.
Oh my
Like,
god.
and you don't even remember this? Like, wow. Like, I did art therapy work around this. Like, I drew a picture of the moment and you don't remember? It was was huge for me to be like, wow.
Like, it's not funny. I'm just laughing
I
because I
know.
get it. Like,
Yeah, I know. It's totally not funny.
oh,
We are away from this. Like, the reason we can laugh is, right, we're away from this process a little bit. We have some distance, but
yeah,
it wasn't funny in the moment. Like, it was such this but now I can laugh about it, and I'm glad you are too, because you can relate.
yeah.
But it was like, oh, like, wow, I have lived my life around this belief that this person doesn't remember. And now I'm like, wow, what do I do now? And so then that's the next step in the work, right? But yeah, it was really, I still sometimes I'm like, gosh, I need to work on that.
So I feel like each one of those ahas that come from, like, doing the deeper, painful work, like, that's kind of, like, my main motivation is those different pain points. It's
Mhm.
just there's so many. It doesn't have to be, like, your one big, huge one, but just, like, the feeling on the other side of that, of
Mhm.
just, the hard conversation. There's just so much freedom on the other side of it.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh,
I
yes.
picture mine like a great big trash bag. Like in our four-step inventory in recovery, we write down, um, who we're angry at, who we're resentful at, why we're angry, what part of self, and then we write down our part, which that's like
Yeah,
the worst part where you see what
that's the hardest. Yeah.
but so
But
I've like carried this great big black trash bag, and I feel like each person, place, idea, memory, each thing that I take out and I investigate and I actually am willing to like confront it in a loving way,
yeah, absolutely.
like it feels like that's just another like weight off of my back. Like
Yeah.
I feel like this freedom each and every time, and it doesn't, it doesn't always stay like that, that glowing, like, high vibe feeling, but that weight doesn't come back on me.
Right. And you're able to recognize things quicker.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you might find yourself in your pattern, but you're like, "Oh, oh, I'm there again." And you can walk it back a little bit, sidestep it. Um, but you're right. I think that once you kind of really process it and have those moments and really do the work, it shifts and changes everything. This work, I always say, is not for the faint of heart, because it's really it's it's it seems simplistic in some ways, and yet it's so complex and
I mean, the basis is simple, sure, but
right.
the work is not.
Mm-mm, it's
It
definitely not. It's complex and multifaceted, and so it's like a woven piece of who you are, and then you're unweaving and reweaving how you want things to be. And so, but it's I wouldn't change it. And anybody I know
same.
that, like, it's like you, and once you start doing the work, you can't undo the work.
You can't
You
unsee.
you can't see what you see, unsee it. No, it's
Yeah.
it's there, and
Mhm.
you feel it, and then you're like, ah, sometimes. But it's also like the beautiful thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the beauty in my life has come from because I don't know if I ever really appreciated anything
Mm,
until now, because now it's like
mm,
getting through those painful things, like, I'm not like, meeting with you, I'm not sitting here going, "Is she thinking about that time that I blah, blah," it's like unpacking those things and
yeah.
healing those things and then having a love for myself. I can just
Mhm.
meet you and talk to Amanda, whereas
Yeah,
before,
absolutely.
I wasn't ever actually talking to anyone just to hear and understand.
Yeah, there was all that insecurity, because I know what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah,
are they remembering? Are they judging me? What do they think? Do I sound stupid? Like, that whole inner dialogue.
yeah,
But when you do that work, you're able to, it's almost like it's a piece. Like, that part is still there, but you learn that they're not in charge, and they learn they're not in charge. They creep in every once in a while, but you
yeah,
really are able to go, no, here, I've got this. And
yeah.
really, it's that relearning the self-trust and trusting yourself again and again, and being able to show up. And I'm glad you are, because I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I'm
Yeah,
having
I
this
didn't think so.
incredible conversation with
I'm like,
you.
"I'm in a closet."
I know, we're like all these things. I'm
Oh
like, oh
yeah.
my gosh. And I remember friends being like, do you really think about that stuff about me? I'm like, no. And they're like, why the hell do you think I would think that about you? I'm like, I don't know. I'm so insecure about myself.
Yeah.
Which is something I think sometimes people don't realize, that sometimes the people who look the most confident in life may not necessarily be the most confident in life.
Yes. So
Mhm.
that's where I try to remember, like, everybody not everybody, but like everybody's read the four agreements, right? And it's
Yeah,
like, oh
that's
yeah,
so
the four agreements. But I'm like, no, but the four agreements, guys. Like, can we just go back to those? Like, if we don't make assumptions
right.
and if we don't take things personally, and if we're
Yeah.
impeccable with our word, and if we
Mhm.
do the next right thing, like, how are we not talking about these every day?
Right, absolutely. They're such an important piece. That has been a huge part of the work that I do too, and what I've created is because, and I want to go back to one piece, like that self-compassion piece you talked about is so important as well. Because of the fact that without that, without, because this work can be so hard, being able to have self-empathy and
Mm,
open-heartedness, that's some of the, like, when I first worked through my own journey through recovery and healing my kind of addiction story,
mhm.
I had to do a lot of work around what do I need to be able to tell my story without feeling bad about myself. So I came up with these practices, but what I found, and you talked about it in compassion, is this empathy and this open-heartedness. Like without those things for yourself, it's really hard to do this work, because then you're within judgment of, and you're constantly judging. But when you can have compassion and empathy, it like judgment goes away, because you're like, I, hold you even though you feel bad about this, and I wouldn't make that decision now. I think that's one of the things, is like looking back at myself and having that compassion of like, I understand why you made that choice then, and thank you.
Yeah.
And because when we find ourselves in self-judgment about what we did, it's because we're looking back with new information that we didn't have at the time. So if we can remember that back then we did the best that we could, and we only saw the options that we saw, and we
Yeah.
took the one that felt the best, even though now 2 minutes later or 10 years later we see that there were other options, it's only because we have all that new information that we
Yeah,
didn't
and
have
when
at
you
that
know
moment.
better, you can do better, but until then,
Exactly. Until then, you have to just trust that you're doing the best that you can.
yep, yeah,
Mhm.
I love that. I love the compassion, um, like, I had so much shame, and I
Mhm.
don't feel that anymore, and
Yeah.
then when I see women come into the rooms, and there's so much shame, and they're like, "I don't think people would ever forgive me for what I did," and I just wanna, like, just squeeze them and, like they so will, like, that will
Yeah.
not be what you'll
And
be remembered for.
yeah, and
Like,
even
that's
if they don't, the
it's
work is
okay.
that it's okay, because that you don't get to choose what other people think, say, or do.
No,
You
I'm not
only get to.
responsible for anyone else. Thank goodness.
Right. So it's that self-forgiveness and that self-love, and really the self-acceptance, which is such a hard thing at some point when you really, with shame, and you feel bad. But the more that you understand and give yourself that compassion and understanding, the more that you're able to work into acceptance and forgiveness, because self-forgiveness is, for you, regardless of whether or not the other person will choose, what they choose is irrelevant when you choose it for yourself and you make the amends, whatever that looks like for you with them. Because some people, it also might not be safe to make amends with
Yeah,
sometimes. So there may be other ways that you energetically do it, and you figure out what's right for you and the work. But absolutely, I think that, remembering that we're not responsible for how other people react. And that if people make amends, I remember my first, I don't know why this is coming up, so I'm just
that's
going to go with
okay.
this.
Go with it.
My first husband like sent me some message on Facebook at some point, and he was like, you were a shooting star and I was a black hole, and kind of, and I was like, oh, you must be in this point of recovery because you're like sending me this message. And I just was like, I'm not going to respond to you, because I don't feel like I owe him anything. I mean, it was a very toxic relationship and it was very unhealthy. And I did not want to engage in that any further. So I didn't respond. And then within a day, he sent me a follow-up message going, what, you're not going to say thank you or anything? And I'm like, I like ended up getting back to poetry, and I was like, I don't owe you a thank you. I don't owe you anything. Like, I was so mad. I wrote a whole poem about it because I'm like, that's not the point of this step. Steps are like, you do this stuff without like the expectation and attachment to what will happen when I do this. Like, it's unattaching from those expectations, which is really hard. Um,
Mm.
because you're like, I want it to go this way. But I was so like, yep, see, like, you're still toxic. Like, I'm glad I didn't respond because,
And
and
that's
then I,
like a living amends for you to not continue the cycle.
right,
I
right,
mean,
to not engage with it. Yeah,
mhm,
absolutely. And so it's just, it was so interesting. But yeah, that unattachment to when we do something, when we apologize, when we acknowledge where we were wrong, doing that and letting it land, and then whatever happens next is not our responsibility,
absolutely.
or do we get a say in what that is?
Mm,
So, and then accepting that it's okay, no matter what happens, I did my part.
yes. So
Hmm.
since we're on the subject, one of the scariest amends that I went to make, I went for my hardest ones first, this time around. I did the steps before, but my heart was not in it.
Yeah.
I wasn't emotionally sober. I was still
Yeah.
lying. Just,
Hmm.
I was still in the yuck.
Yeah.
So this time around, I was so desperate that I was like, let it wash over me. Like, I'm not here to figure it out. I'm here to do whatever you tell me. So when it came to my amends, my sponsor said, let's go for the ones that you really don't want to do first. So I think you can probably guess who that would be. And I didn't feel that I did or I didn't owe this person an amends, but
Hmm.
my amends was to own up to what I did.
Right. Absolutely.
And it does not involve the other person whatsoever. So
Right.
just writing it,
Hmm.
that's the self-forgiveness. And
Yeah.
then the next thing, this is where I felt my conscious contact with my higher power, was
Mm.
my willingness to try to offer it. We offer it and then that's it.
Right.
It's none of our business if they don't respond, if they do, if they, like it, if they don't, if they want to be
Right.
friends, if they don't, that's not our business, like you were just saying.
Exactly.
But, I was so thankful that I offered that and didn't get any response in that.
Right. Absolutely. You're like, whew, I don't have to
Because I
engage with it
couldn't,
now.
I had to like reach out to a former family member and like get an address and send it to a family member saying, "Hey, can you forward this?"
Hmm.
And then that was it. But the fact that
Hmm.
I did that,
Hmm.
and you don't send the letter, you just say, "Would you be willing to hear my letter?"
Right.
Then that's a no.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
good,
If they
good,
don't
good.
respond, that's okay.
But I was
Yeah.
willing, but the point was just, I got out of that what I needed because I
Mhm.
forgave myself and I let
Absolutely.
everybody else off the hook.
Hmm. Yeah. Cause, sometimes we're like holding on to and seething on all of this and brooding and really staying in it. And when we do that, we are like energetically, karmically attached to them.
Absolutely. And not just that, we're still continuing that energy.
Absolutely. And there's energy leaks, and
Mhm.
there's, you know, just connection to things that necessarily are not helpful to us. And so when we recognize that and we do the things that kind of can create this container, not that it shuts people out, but it really helps us attend to where are we spending our energy and where are we spending our focus, then we really get to then choose, okay, do I want to continue this path or not?
Mhm.
And then what is underneath? I always love this. Like, okay, so yeah, I want to keep doing this. I want to keep it. So what's underneath that? Like, what's my motivation for continuing to hold this relationship or this connection open, that I know, like, it's always interesting to kind of dig into that a little bit, because you find out a lot about yourself and you're like, oh,
It's
or
because
where,
I don't feel worthy of letting it go, or I don't, yeah, it's like when
right,
you start
absolutely.
figuring out exactly where it is. Like, it's okay if you hang on to it, but let's figure out why exactly you think that it
Right. Absolutely. I love that you brought worthiness up, because I think a lot of the things that we do, why we choose some of the people that do, and like when I wrote my book and talking about my story, is I remember my mom having this, like, you know, about being in a relationship with people, like, people treat you the way you treat them, right? So that's kind of the thing, but people treat you the way you treat yourself, is what I've
Right.
come to believe. And if you don't believe that you're worth somebody better than for me in my first marriage, the toxic person who gaslights you and makes you feel bad and cheats on you, then you're going to choose to be in that relationship if you feel unworthy, because you're playing out your own story. And so that validates the story and narrative you tell yourself. And so when you
Yes.
start shifting your story, and, as I healed my worthiness, I started to understand that no, I am worth more than this. And I will not put up with these things. And I will change how I engage and interact with people and who I choose to be in relationship with, because that's not what I want for my relationship. And so it's in that self-healing that then you get to change the dynamics of relationships as well.
Yes.
Hmm.
So, yeah, like changing your sorry, I just lost my thought.
It's okay. It happens to
That's
me
the
all
thing.
the time. What you're saying. So narrative, paradigm, your self-belief.
So I did wanna talk about, like, did you know when you, like, moved up there, when you got to Oregon, did you know, like, "I'm gonna help other people feel this awesome, like, I'm gonna help other people walk through this."
No, really, like, so my work has always been about helping people in transition, like, really, but it was like all people in transition for everything. But did I know I would specifically focus in on helping people who are navigating through divorce and relationship endings? No. In fact, I took a time off for my business for a little while, because a coach I had was like, I think you need to eat, pray, love for a bit. You've been through massive transformation, you've been through massive things. I mean, I went from raising my nephew with my ex husband, being married, living in Arizona, to being divorced, an empty nester, and moving in a new state. Oh, and left a toxic job to move to a new job into a state that I had really like I knew a couple people, but I didn't really know people here. So I
Mhm.
moved, and the difference even in environment of climate. So I'd been through all these massive shifts and all these massive changes. And it was hard for me to recognize that that's not normal. That
I
most
hear you
people,
there. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
most people don't do things like this, especially all the most stressful things that you could ever do in your life all at one time.
It's comfort in chaos.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that we understand that we're comfortable in chaos is something to be really aware of and acknowledge, and then work on being more calm and comfortable in the calmness of life, right? Because that's where I know I've been like, okay, it's too calm. I need to, like, I need
Jazz
to
it
do
up.
something. I need
Mhm.
something in my life. But yeah, I had no idea. And so I did. I started to eat, pray, love a little bit more, which is why I deepened into that relationship, that didn't work out, or it ended. It worked out the way it needed to, right? I truly believe things do. But that relationship, but I really fully focused on understanding myself in relationship, and I focused on doing some stuff with my dog, and I really just kind of focused on a little bit more stuff for me, and really getting back to doing things that I enjoy, like going to the ballet and really kind of engaging in some of those things. And so it was only when I was like at a place that I was like, okay, I think it's time that I come back to focusing on my business, doing the work here, and being able to show back up of that. I kind of shifted my focus to helping people who are navigating through divorce and ending long-term relationships. So
And
yeah.
I love that. I love seeing your work because everything that I see you post or see you share, like, I totally relate, and I can think of people that are either gonna be there soon or are walking through it now, or,
Yeah.
if I wouldn't have been in the middle of my steps, like, I would have needed someone to help me recognize where a boundary was needed, or
Yeah.
where, like the ex didn't wanna move out of the house. Like,
Hmm.
when the time that he was gonna move out, like, there was just so many things that, like, I didn't know how to stand up for myself. Like, I knew that I was doing that, but I needed, like, a guide. I needed a coach.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so I love, love, love that you're doing that. And, when I was still in Vegas, I was thinking I would love to be a divorce coach, but my idea of being a divorce coach, and granted, I was engaged to a person not even related to our conversation today.
Right.
I was engaged to this very nice man, and,
Mhm.
I was already thinking about how I could help people get divorced, but my idea was like, in Vegas, you're right next to the BLM land. I'm like, we take them out, they shoot big guns, like, like we set up targets for them, and then like we get them like drugs, and we get them super drunk and take them, on a helicopter tour and take them to all these restaurants and like all the really toxic things because I was in such a toxic place to where I was like, well, this is my reality. How can I share this reality with these women?
Mhm.
When, like, now, like, this is my reality, and I'm like, "How can I help share this reality with these women?" Which is, like, the
Right.
polar opposite. I still
Right.
wanted to help people then, but my idea of
It
what
was so
helping
different and then how it is now. Yeah.
that was, like, 2018, like, that's not that long ago.
No, that's not that long ago.
It's not.
But I think that goes to show that growth can happen so rapidly
Oh,
and
yeah.
things can shift and change. Especially what I've noticed is when you choose yourself, that and you prioritize yourself. And this doesn't mean you're being mean to other people or neglectful, but when you choose yourself and to live your most authentic truth, then things can shift rapidly. And when you're in that space, like, you're not going to be mean to people. How people take it, and if they try to make you feel guilty or bad because they don't agree, which can happen. People
Mhm,
can be really like cruel in their ways that they engage with you. It doesn't mean you're being mean. It means they don't like how you're showing up now, because they're not you're not allowing them to influence you the same way. So then
right.
they'll kind of do some things to kind of try to get you back in line. But the more you stay your course and your truth, and things will open up, that you're like, wow. Like, I was so shocked from the time that so this is literally, I had to we in January 8th we got in a big fight, we said yes to a divorce,
Mhm.
and this was the beginning of 2021. February 5th I moved out, we filed divorce February 12th. In March I was like, I think I want to go back to Oregon, to where I kind of grew up, to just kind of do some soul healing and reconnection and get nurtured a little bit. And so I booked a trip, and then I was like, I people were asking me, so where are you going to live? When are you moving out of your mom's? Which I don't think I ever would have been able to do living in Arizona with the cost of housing and all of
Mhm.
that stuff. Um, and I was like, yeah, I can move anywhere. And I remember it was kind of the end of March, and I'm like, maybe I should apply for some places in like Oregon to see if they need social workers. It's a small town here. And
Yeah.
I'm like, they probably don't need any social workers. They probably got what they need. And the hospital I work at now was looking for a social worker and had been looking for a social worker for quite a long time. So I applied there, I applied some other places, and I had started having interviews before even I flew up. And then I came and met people when I was up here. And literally, so that was the end of March, then April, I'm here. I fly back home. And by May 10th, I have an offer for the hospital that I work at. I'm divorced on May 24th. In that time frame, my nephew had turned 18 and graduated from high school. And so I'm here literally, and by the way, I don't have a place to live yet, but I kept trusting, I kept believing, I kept feeling like I'm supposed to be here and I'm choosing myself. I'm going to lean into this, even though I have no idea how it's going to work out. So now I have the job offer, but I like didn't have a place to live. Housing is also very hard here because it's small rural towns. Um, and then I had a dog on top of it, so that makes it harder because lots of people don't want to rent to. I don't know why people with dogs who rent, seem to destroy houses, but I don't have to understand it. It
Yeah.
just made my story a little bit harder. And then but I just called like different companies who are rental management companies, and I connected with somebody over our dogs. They hadn't had a rental for a year. I'm literally coming at the end of May. So I have my offer, but I need to do my new hire and sign and secure everything. So the end of May was like the 30th, 29th, 30th.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pulling up to the airport and I still don't have a place to live. I have no idea. I'm supposed to be starting my new job by like the 21st of June. I'm moving, I think I was leaving the 8th or something in June. And I'm pulling up to the airport and they call me and they're like, we have a house. It just came to us. It's not even on the market. It's 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a mile from the beach with a 2-car garage, and they'll let you have your dog. And I'm like, okay, can I see it tomorrow? And so literally it was within 2 weeks of me supposing to need to be here. And I was thinking I was gonna have to stay at like this trailer at a friend, but I had no idea. That very moment the phone call came in, the trailer was becoming unavailable because of some family stuff that had happened. And so
Wow.
she was not going to be able to let me stay there because her partner's daughter needed to come down because her partner was going through some stuff medically. And so she was going to need to be there. And I had no idea that that housing disappeared and this housing appeared. And so it's just testament when you choose to follow through and commit to yourself and do the work that things will. It might not happen that rapidly, but it absolutely also could.
And
Like
it seems to. Like that
it,
momentum just spitfires.
yeah, it's like that slingshot you talked about. You
Yeah.
like trust, trust, trust. Okay, I'm gonna lean back. I'm gonna lean back. I'm not gonna. It's like that marble in the rock in the slingshot. You just keep leaning back and keep going. Okay, I'm not gonna try to control this because that's what I find sometimes. A lot of times is we are trying to control how things happen, what things look like, and when we can be hands off and show up and trust,
Yeah.
then it's like boom, there you go, and you're
And
like,
it's way
whoa.
better than what we would have like controlled and manipulated to be. But
Absolutely.
it's also
Absolutely.
really hard to do what you did and to trust and let go.
Yes.
But that's where the miracles are, like whatever you want to call them. Like that's where the
Yeah.
magic is. That is where, like, when you just let creative energy do its thing, it it shows itself and
It does
it's
its
way
thing.
better than anything that we could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I constantly have to remember that for for myself of like not reaching in and trying to grab out is like,
Mhm.
no, like if I'm supposed to be in a relationship, then it's going to show up. It's going to show up and it's going to be the relationship that I need in the moment. I need to trust that where I'm at right now is enough. And the more that I continue to choose my steps and my journey, and the more that I continue to choose this path and be my most authentic self and
Yeah.
not get stuck in fear, which it always comes up for us, but we
Yeah.
can work through it. And I find that, people are like, well, I just need to get over my fear. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works.
Right.
No, you're going to do it, which is where bravery and courage comes in.
Do it scared.
Do it scared. You're going to do
Yeah.
it scared. You're going to do it while your knees wobble. You're going to face your fear, and you're going to be like, it's in the face of fear that you do the things. And it's really opening up to the fear and going, okay, I know I'm scared and I'm going to do it anyways. I know all this bad catastrophe things could happen and I'm going to do it anyways. And I think the one thing that I was like, well, the worst case scenario is I end up broke and living on my mom in my mom's house. And I'm like, well, I'm not broke, but I'm living in my mom's house. So I'm
Yeah.
technically at my worst case scenario. And I know that if things fall apart, I can come back to my mom's house or I can do
Yeah.
this thing. Like there's, so it was just kind of funny because yeah, it really is about that doing it and finding that courage and that belief and the bravery, tapping into your courage and bravery
Mhm.
is really how you get through fear.
And what I really heard you say is, like, you just took the next best step for you.
Yeah,
Not just the
absolutely.
next best step that I would think is a good step, or that your mom or society, or no, like, you just, like you were saying, you were living authentically, and you
Yeah,
just, like, you didn't have everything figured out, because we're so focused on, um, on the destination and on the final product, and, like, knowing how it's all gonna unfold, but the how is not up to us.
right. Absolutely.
Like, just each step is what got you there, and everything else was there.
Right. And the more that you can release the destination,
Yeah.
it's like the more you can release so much focus on that. It's like a coach talked to me about, it's like, do you follow, you want to get to that tree in front of you across the, snowy field. So do you focus on the path in front of you or do you focus on the tree? Well, neither. You focus on both. You've got to be paying attention to where the tree is, but following your path and looking up to see, am I walking to take me in that direction? Because if we don't kind of know kind of where we're going, then we just end up wherever.
Then we could veer off the path.
Right. But if we never look down to pay attention to what's underneath us, like I don't know if you've ever done that walking, but you could hit a hole and twist your ankle or break your leg or trip
More
and
so, yeah,
fall.
Washington for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I remember it's like for me learning about growing up in the desert and when I lived in Arizona, there's dangers, there's rattlesnakes and there's things that'll bite you. So pay attention to where you walk, but always remember to look up periodically, but find this like 3 to 6 feet ability to pay attention to what steps you're taking while you look up because there's danger.
Your hula hoop.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's like such an important thing to remember is those it's and you said this earlier which we didn't highlight but it's not the either or it's always the both and.
Oh, yeah.
It's always the both and of
And
things.
also, yes.
Yep. Yeah, because when we get in the duality of life and say it's only black or white, it's only this way or that way, there's so much that we're missing and that we're again kind of missing the whole point of our human experience of this. It's there's so much gray and things, and then we're trying to control and force things. And
Yep, I definitely get called out quite often, for the black and white thinking, because I'll be talking, like, my focus on something that's frustrating or challenging me, I say all day, like, the obstacle is the way, and, like, this is just another growth opportunity. Dude, when I'm faced with something, my, like, I totally zoom in instead of
yeah,
out. Like, my big picture is very limited. And it's like, fortunately, I work with another person. Like, I have a sponsor, but I'm also working to become a coach, because
right.
not only, I have a sponsor, I am a sponsor, but I want to help women who don't have to
Mhm.
go to the depths and despair of addiction to
Yeah, absolutely. Or who are coming out of it, releasing that shame and really being
Yes.
able to find their power because there is so much. I mean, like just my story in addiction, I never talked about my story. In fact, I had a really hard time even acknowledging I might have been an addict.
See, and
Like,
I knew that about you, but I didn't know anything about it.
right. Yeah. Most people don't, because I never talked about it. I was so quiet because I was so scared of being judged. And it was my crazy time, quote unquote. That was like how we talked about it. Mandy's crazy time. And I didn't
Oh.
want to let people know about that. And my path to recovery is so different. It doesn't include AA. So I think understanding that there are lots of paths, but
Hmm.
there are so many similarities in different paths that you find, and it's just fascinating because I mean, I can say that I had a problem with drug addiction, but to say I was a drug addict still is hard for me because
Yeah.
that goes against a lot of my core value, like about just how I talk about myself. And so
Hmm.
I am not a drug addict. I had a drug problem. And I think for me, language and how you use language is really important. Um, but that doesn't mean that I like, I can't also dismiss that I had a problem with it, right? There's like
Yeah.
this, it's a complex thing. And so for me, but to even be able to acknowledge that I had a drug addiction and then to be able to talk about that it was with meth, because a lot of people I like, ooh, it's very taboo and everybody ends up this way. And I'm just like, but that's not true. But I never wanted to talk about it because I didn't want people to judge me. But secretly, I was judging myself. And what I found,
Absolutely.
yeah, through all my work is that the more that I accepted that about myself, it helped me understand. And this is what I take from that experience a lot is that doing and choosing to use drugs and having an addiction with it, it really did help me understand why people end up there. And like having more compassion and empathy for people who have chosen to have that in their life.
Hmm.
I understand personally what takes you there, what took me there. I mean, a lot of people get there for a multitude of reasons, but when you've been there, you have this unique ability that somebody who's never experienced it to understand them in a way where they can be felt and they can be heard and they can be seen without judgment because, oh, you've walked this path, you
I didn't read
understand.
about it in a book. I've
Yeah,
been there.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've walked it, I've been there, I've seen it. So I'm able to support people in shame in such a deeper way than someone who may not have been able, who's not had those experiences. And it doesn't mean those people aren't compassionate or loving or even judging you, but there is something about being felt and seen that is so different when you yourself, you're like, my capacity feels bigger
Hmm.
because I've had this. It's not in spite of. No, a lot of these, and I often use the change of those words too. It's not in spite of these things, it's because of these things, because of these experiences and these things that I'm able to do this. Um, and so yeah, it's just, but it took me a long time. I mean, I think the first time I actually wrote about my story, I was already 2 years into my work. And it was like in 20 or two, it might have been in 2012, but I was, or no, maybe it was in 2015 or 2014. Because if I started my work in 2012, then it would have had to been a couple of years later.
Hmm.
And it was so fascinating because I'm like, I sent an email out with all this fear that people are going to judge me. And I got an incredible response back from people. And then I put a blog out, and then my website got hacked. And so I had to re put it all out.
No.
So it was like this constant, like I had to re show up and re talk about my story and
Which
re,
probably happened for a reason, for
of
your
course
own.
it
Yeah.
did. Of course it did. It's like, no, you can't just do this one time.
Hmm.
You've got to get comfortable with this. And so now it's easier for me to talk about, for me to not feel that like shame inside, for me to really be able to go, yeah, I went through this and I have enough distance from it that it, and has done enough healing that I still know what it feels like, but I don't judge myself for going through it. And I'm incredibly grateful for that Amanda and that version of myself because she helped me become part of who I am today. And so
Very
I
much
think that,
so.
yeah, that gratitude that we can find in all of our experiences is so critical and important.
Yes, I totally, totally agree. And thank you for sharing that little bit of your story.
Absolutely.
You know, um I kind of shout it from the rooftop. And there's, I'm in an anonymous program. I'm just not anonymous. I wouldn't have gone to treatment the first time, and it didn't stick, but it worked because it planted the seed and it took what
Yeah,
it took.
absolutely.
For I
Yeah,
had to get desperate enough, and I really hope, that doesn't have to be everybody's story. I'm hoping that
yeah,
people don't have to go to that point to recognize that what they're doing isn't benefiting them.
right.
Whether it's binge drinking or whatever it is. I'm
Whatever
really
it is.
glad that people can drink and enjoy it and just,
Yeah.
have a nice normal time. Like, I'm still a bartender. I love the camaraderie and the
Mhm.
energy of it. But for me, like, I know that it's not right, but I'm also very vocal about the fact that I don't drink because
Yeah.
the people say, like, I recover loudly so others don't have to die in silence. And it's like,
Yeah.
it was another bartender who I've never shared her info because she is back to drinking, but another bartender that I love and respect was like, dude, I'm kind of getting out of control. I'm checking into this place. It's a detox. Like, people are going there to quit drinking, but I'm just doing it to get things under control. And I just
Mm.
thought you would want to know about it. And I was like, I do. And then
Hmm.
it was like, because in the morning I was shaking. Like, by
Yeah.
2019, like, I would start the shower and I would pour myself a shot of vodka just so that I could take a shower because I was shaking
Right.
so bad.
Yeah.
And I sipped on vodka. Most people, I mean, there was times I got in trouble at work, but most of the time people couldn't tell how bad I was unless they saw me sober.
Right. Absolutely. Because it was just part of who you were at that point.
Yeah, and being a bartender, it was very socially acceptable, and all my
Yeah.
friends, did shots at 7 in the morning,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what's the big deal? But it was just the fact that I could no longer live without it.
Right. Absolutely.
And then, doing, like, yeah, like, supplementing things so that I could drink longer and later, and, you
Yeah.
know
Right.
and I could afford to do that, and,
Right.
so, yeah, anywho, I do try to be vocal about it because somebody else was vocal about it, and it was like, there are people that I don't identify with, and I hear their story, and I'm glad that they tell their story, but that's not me.
Yeah.
But when this person was me looking at me and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go down this door, and if you wanna go, you can come too." I was like, "Oh god, I want that."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love the fact that you said you're vocal because I think that is so important. I think that with shame, or I know that with shame, like it's
Mhm.
silence. Silence is what is keeps shame brooding. And Brene Brown talks a lot about this. And
Yeah.
um, the more that we can let our voice be heard and the more that we speak about this, and that is one thing is like I absolutely support being vocal about it. And I'm glad you are because people feel so alone in their addiction or sometimes in their whatever you're going through when you're carrying shame, you feel alone and then you don't reach out, and then because of that then you feel more alone and you feel more shameful. And
Mhm.
one of the reasons I love like group work and being in group, and this is one of the powerful things about the AA community that you can definitely attest to, is that being in community and hearing someone else's story, and I've seen this in the groups that I've run for women, is that when you hear people tell a story similar to yours, you feel so validated and
I
you
feel so
feel so
seen.
seen. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And I remember there was a group that I was running and we were talking about, I don't even remember the topic at this point, but it was really, there were 10 women and we were in a Starbucks meeting room, which was like basically a fishbowl. And these women were being so authentic, like 6 out of 10 cried. And I'm like, oh my God, but that's absolutely a beautiful thing because they were being like, oh, I'm not alone in this. Thank you for sharing that. And it was this huge ability to connect with people. And so it is so important that we tell our stories so other people know that there's the opportunity to get help, that life doesn't have to look like this, that there's, I always look at, you said a guide earlier. I see myself that way. I don't walk in your shoes, I walk next to you. So the work that I do, you're on your path and I'm on my path, and together we walk. And I
Mhm.
may help you navigate this because I'm a little farther along, but it's still your path. You still get to choose what steps to take. It's just my ability to help you getting curious and understand why, and that wonderment of like, well, I wonder what that's about, or, I wonder if I did this, what would happen? And then really being able to make your decisions based on that versus like out of just fear.
Yes, I love that so much. So, I mean, like addiction and divorce are not the same thing, but are so closely related because, like you just said, they both like there's so much shame behind wanting to end a marriage because you're
Yeah.
not supposed to. That's the opposite of what saying I do means. But
Right.
also, the whole supposed to can suck it. Like,
Right.
have you read Byron Katie? Like, I'm such a huge fan of Byron Katie.
Oh, I love the work. Yes, she
Yeah,
was a
so
huge piece. Like, is it true?
still
Can
a
you
daily
absolutely
she's part
know?
of my daily work also.
I always, a lot of my work is what like I do, and I work with my clients. I introduce them to her work a lot because of the fact that she works so highly in that, in
Mhm.
our self judgment. And yeah, she's
And
huge.
she
I
just
love
said,
her.
like, "Get rid of the word should." Like, it either is or it isn't. Like,
Yeah.
is this working? Can you absolutely know? Like, if it's not, move on. Like,
Yeah.
I love her so much.
She's amazing. And you can download, there's like, if you go to her website, you can download the little book, and she's got worksheets and lots of great stuff on YouTube. But her work is like really, it's so lovingly and like tough at the same time.
I was
She's
gonna
like
say it's
there.
lovingly, like, brutal.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so honest and so like, and what if you didn't believe this thought? And you're like, what the hell?
How
If
would
I
you
didn't
feel
believe
without
it,
this thought? I'm like, "I would feel fucking great, but I wait, I can is
exactly.
that a thing?"
Can I do that? Can I choose that? It's like so freeing. Her work is so great. And I love that you're introduced to her as well, because I find not everybody knows about her work, and it is just fabulous. And she literally calls it the work. And I'm like, it was so influential on me. And I just remember, so her and Brene Brown and, the Four Agreements were huge pieces of the
Mhm,
beginning of work that I did when I worked with my very first coach for the bikini competition. Like, those were like three of the first four books that she recommended that we
mhm,
read. And so it was so interesting because, yeah, you are like, oh, I can choose something different. And if I
mhm.
didn't believe that, or I love her turnarounds in the sense of like, you're like, they should be calling me, they should be doing this. And it's like, one of the turnarounds is like, I should be calling them. I like, so it puts ownership back onto you of what not necessarily should you be doing, because I feel like that's shitting on yourself when you
But
shit on
what could you
yourself.
be doing?
But what could you be doing?
Yes,
How could you be showing up for this differently? And if you don't want to, then why are you making a big deal about this? Like, it leads to so much more questions um,
yes.
that help you explore what's underneath your hesitance and your, you know, ability to kind of do this stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. I love it, and I don't love doing the work when I am upset. And
Oh,
my mom turned me on to Byron Katie. Like, my, Loving What Is copy is, like, highlighted with little notes written by my mom, and I every time I'm at a bookstore, like a used bookstore, I look for copies of that to share with people because
oh
I,
yeah.
like, love sharing her work. But
Yeah.
when I'm talking to my mom and I'm just wanting to vent, instead, I'm getting the questions, and I'm like, "Look, lady, this is not that."
Right. So it's like, yeah, learning how to do that. I like that. Okay, I need 5 minutes to vent and then we can do this. Like, because I do feel like sometimes I'm a big advocate. You still need to feel what you feel. You
Yeah.
still need to be angry. You still need to express it. It's when we stop connecting with our emotion and we start making it wrong. We shouldn't do that.
Hmm.
And we move too quickly into positive and gratitude without feeling. That's where you kind of get in trouble.
And that's where I've been lately.
Yeah.
But
So
I
really,
got called out and I see it.
yeah, so it's that moment of like, okay, I need to vent, I need to do this, I need to process, but I have to feel the anger and the frustration and whatever emotion, so then I can grieve my expectation, so then I can move into my gratitude and the positive things from this, the lessons, whatever it is.
Yes.
But it's a process, and when we jump too quickly,
We're
then one,
stuffing.
yes, we're stuffing. Absolutely, which is not good because that
No.
shit explodes.
Yeah. And I'm an exploder. So I'm learning these things because I've been so darn happy, like
Mhm.
things are going my way. And I think it's because I've just kind of let go of which way my way is.
Mhm.
And,
Mm.
but then I'm noticing like I'm in a new place and, there's just all these different little
Yeah.
factors to where there's some discomfort and there's some expectations that, are not being met. Like, just like finding a job or, everywhere I've
Yeah.
gone, I succeed and I make a lot of money. And like, it's a little different here. It's a little more affordable in Corpus Christi,
Mhm.
Texas, but it's also,
Yeah.
your pay is far less than
Right.
in Seattle
Absolutely.
area. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's very different in
So
between the two.
I've had to like explode in order for someone to be like, so if you just felt your feelings instead of spinning them right away, if you just said, I'm frustrated that I haven't found a job, or
Mhm.
I'm disappointed that when I found this job, it wasn't what I hoped it would be.
Yeah,
Or,
absolutely.
but instead you just go, I'm just gonna keep on and just clicking your heels down your little merry way. Like,
Right. Yeah, dating is a lot like that, that allowing the disappointment and kind of processing through that and just, but the it's an opportunity for us to grow when we can allow ourselves to feel how we feel and to really acknowledge the truth in that. Like the disappointment is huge. This didn't meet my expectation. I
yeah.
mean, the last date I went on, I had all this envision of what it would look like based upon the limited information that I got from the person who set up my date because it was a blind date and how they described the person. So I created all these like stories and researched where we were going, and so I dressed a certain way and expected this person to do the same thing, and they did not. And I was like immediately deflated. Very nice person, not a good fit and match, but it was a real interesting thing for me to go to be able to like acknowledge my disappointment, but then see where I'm putting expectation
Oh
and
yeah.
having expectations of what things will be like instead of staying in the wonderment and curiosity
Hmm.
and being able to just like go with the flow in some essence, but really just kind of like being like, oh, that curiosity, like, wow, what's this gonna be like without the other parts?
Yep, I love that you said the wonderment and the curiosity, but it's really, really hard to manage our expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, it is because we're so used to that and we're told that we're supposed to, like not have expectations, but then have expectations, but then don't have them, but
Yeah.
then, be grateful, but don't expect too much, but you need to have, and you're like, I don't even know what to think anymore. Like, so how do I navigate this? And it's truly, I think, a trial and error and acknowledging where you are and being able to talk about them, whether it's in your relationship or your job or dating, like knowing what your motivation is
Mhm.
for what you're doing, even in recovery. Like, what is your motivation for recovering? Like you brought up that person earlier, there was, to be able to manage it better, whereas somebody else's was to be able to actually go through the path of recovery and healing so they didn't keep making those choices.
Yeah.
It's just, what is your motivation for what you're doing?
Fortunately, like, my motivation was the same as hers, but that was not my reality.
Right.
Yeah. So it is interesting though. Like once my motivation did flip, like you say, like once I went out and I drank again and then I went back, my motivation was whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And like that's what I got. Like I it sounds really, really cheesy and I love it. I so have no shame in being cheesy that like more times than not, I bask in the sunlight of the spirit. I am happy, joyous, and free.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but I didn't experience those things before.
I love that for you.
Yeah, so it's really neat.
Yeah, it is. And I would say the same thing. I'm not always happy and
No.
but it and life is tough sometimes. And I've had to really get comfortable with being able to say, you know what? I'm not really okay today. I'm
Mhm.
having a hard day because I'm so used to keeping my shit together for everybody else that I don't even know how I'm feeling. Like I remember somebody going, could you be having some issues around depression? I'm like, depression? What is that?
Yeah.
I'm not depressed. You're crazy. And then I had to think, and I'm like, would I even know if I was? Would I even know if I was anxious? Or am I just so used to living in a world where I don't allow myself to feel,
Mhm.
regardless of whether I use drugs or drink or whatever it is, that I'm just so disconnected from my own feelings
Mhm.
that I would know if I was? And that took a huge piece. And I wasn't necessarily depressed, but I was super stressed out and I was really anxious and I was super unhappy. So there probably was some elements of depression, you
Yes.
know?
And I
And
totally identify with everything you just said.
yeah. So it's being able to get reconnected with our own emotion and allowing ourselves to feel. And that's been a journey. I still have to remember to sometimes check in, like, how am I feeling about this right now?
Mhm. It's a beautiful journey though.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't take any of it. Like people have asked, I don't know about you, but people have asked me if you could go back, would you change it?
No.
Would you change anything?
I would not.
Yeah, me neither. I would
I
not
love where it's brought me.
absolutely. There are things that absolutely I've regretted, things that I've been like, I wish I would have done that differently. But I'm glad I would not change a thing because then I wouldn't have the insight and knowledge and be where I am. Could I be farther in life? Sure. But could I be farther back too? Could I be?
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't know. So it's coming to that term that I'm okay and happy with who I am today. And I think that's one of the big things is like we go through things in life and we make choices and there are consequences. It's not bad or evil or good or bad or right or wrong. They're just things that happen based upon our choices. And the more that we go, do I like what's happening right now? Not from a place of judgment, but a place of love. And if I don't, what do I need to do differently to be in a different place? And it's really that space of then choosing. And so those everything like that's brought you and me to this place, we get to reflect back. We get to go, yeah, I don't like how I did that. So I'm going to choose to do it differently moving forward. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm still going to mess up. I'm probably going to
Mhm.
get caught in my pattern, but I'm going to recognize it and I'm going to shift it when I can.
And that's it.
Absolutely.
Like that's the big gist of it all.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, 2 hours in a nutshell is just, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm getting. If I shift how I look at it and shift how I show up for it, I'm gonna get something different. I would not
Yes.
change a thing either. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, it's been so good seeing you.
Yes, it's been so good seeing you and catching up. I'm so grateful we're both on the journeys that we are and that,
Me
we
too.
get a chat about it too. This is the best.
It is. I wanna do this again.
Yeah,
Hopefully you
I'd
do
love to.
too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I could totally do this
You're
again.
my first interview.
Really?
Yes, I've just done solo stuff, so
You've been doing great then.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Well,
love the natural conversation of it.
I
So,
decided early on, like, I don't want to sit down and have scripted questions. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's something I want to ask, I feel like it'll come up in conversation, but like I totally want to flow.
Yeah. I love when this format. I love the openness, the ability to just talk and kind of let the conversation naturally go, because I find that it's so much more juicy and resonant to other people when, because you talk about the real stuff and you just go like, we're like, I don't know why this is coming up, but we're going to go with it.
Yes.
So I feel like these are the best conversations to have.
They
So
are.
thank you for letting me be your first conversation.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so glad you were. You were the like I
Yeah.
totally thought of you, and this is funny. I'll make it quick. I was like, okay, I'm gonna like, reach out and I'm gonna, make appointments for interviews, and like I'm gonna ask Amanda. I'm like, we're on like a similar path, but I didn't want the podcast about recovery necessarily, but recovery
Right.
from self,
Right.
recovery from
Absolutely.
life's challenges.
Right.
Um, and then I asked you, and then I was looking on Facebook and I saw that you were on the gratitude podcast. And I'm like, well, I hope she doesn't think I just asked her just because I saw. I'm like, and then
No,
I was
I
like,
was
I
actually
don't think she cares.
I didn't. And actually, I would put down to reach out to you because I knew you'd put out a podcast to see if you'd be interested in talking to me.
Oh, good.
So I was like, hey, I was going to reach out to you. Actually, I'd written your name down. I'm like, okay, I need to remember to reach out to Brandy. And in that time, the other podcast came out, and then you reached out to me, and I'm like, oh, yeah, hell yeah.
There it is.
Absolutely. So,
Perfect.
yeah. Yay.
Okay, well, yay. I will talk to you soon and I will let you
Okay.
know when I have a date.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I will definitely, how I do it, just so you know,
Mhm.
is I will obviously share on my social media, and sometimes I'll go and make little clips of things and try to find just to help promotion. But also, I'll link back to if you are just, I'll link it back on my website. So I have a media page.
Mhm.
So I will put it there so people can direct traffic to you as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so I have a web page that I have not done anything with. All I have is the page.
that's
And
okay.
then I have my Facebook group, which I have 84 people in 3 weeks, which is super
That's
exciting
awesome.
because
Yeah,
I
that's
was just
really
like, I'm overthinking this. Fuck it. So I have I
good.
have
Yeah.
that. And then Instagram I'm kind of being lazy about, but I'll get there.
Yeah, I don't do so much on Instagram. I'm pretty much on Facebook, and then but I do have an email list and I'll share it with them, and then and so if you have your website, are you gonna, when you build your website, are you gonna put the links to the shows there? Um
Probably.
okay, so if you do that, I'll link to your website because that'll actually float traffic. Um
Okay.
so it'll just depend on how you do it, because usually I try to link right to the show. But if
Well,
you
so
have it,
it'll be because I'll be like I'll launch the trailer. Like I don't have a spot to send people yet, but it'll be
okay,
on Spotify, on iTunes, on
perfect.
Apple
Well,
Podcasts, on all of the
yeah,
platforms. So
perfect. So I'll make sure I connect and promote you, and
thank you.
absolutely. And if I ever decide to get back to my podcast, then I'll be reaching out to you,
Oh
because
yeah.
my podcast is about being courageous in your life. So
Yeah.
I figure you can talk on that for a
I
bit.
would love to. Yes. Yes, yes.
So
This
I don't
stuff I
have
would love.
plans for it, but I like right now I don't have immediate plans, but in the next year or so, I may switch that up because I do think about it a little bit. And it may even be more posed to like looking at relationships and divorce too. So we'll see. I
That's a
haven't,
big part of it.
yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to have you on as well.
Yes, I would love that. Okay.
Okay. All right.
I love you. This was
I love you.
wonderful.
Yes, I do too. And so I love you as well. And I'm so glad that we are both in the spaces that we are, because I know it's also just funny because I know when you say certain things, how you say it. And